Ding, 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 ding. We're all here now. Perfect. Welcome. I'm Justin. I'm addicted to research. So a couple of years ago, I did another talk that was very similarly titled at the GIA library in Carlsbad, California, which is like the biggest, best gem library in America. And I thought, since we're right below probably the best gem library in Europe, that I should write a similar sequel talk. So that one was How to Party Like a Scholar. This one is How to Party Like a British Scholar. So I'm Justin. I wrote a book. We're sort of having a meeting the author. So I'm the author. Sadly, there's no books. But anyway, I'm from Chicago originally. I'm American. I'm a cutter. And I've been traveling around the world, meeting cutters and writing about cutters and learning what they're doing and just documenting all this stuff. So we put some of that knowledge into this first book. And as I've been chatting with you guys, there's a new one coming out in a couple of months, which is the historic teachings of gem cutting. So we're getting deeper and deeper into the history as more of these books come out. And then we've got a school where we're teaching cutting. And if you're interested in that, I've got some flyers up here. Sadly, we're not teaching in London, but we are teaching in France. So if you need a warm holiday, just jump across and we're there. Or if you want to go to New York, but I don't recommend that. Just go to France, it's better. Yeah, my ultimate plan, this is like I don't know if this is a 10-year plan now or whatever, but ultimately, I've got a couple of really big books in my head. One of them is about how faceting started in Europe, and the other one's how faceting started in America. And both of those books are pretty much written, but only up here. And it takes a long time to sit down and actually pen them out. And Europe is so hard because there's so many countries. You know, I haven't even been to Germany yet, so I can't even start it. So anyway, I got started on this journey like I think 7 years ago. And very quickly in the journey, I came to Europe. I was living in Bangkok at that time. I came to Europe to do some research, and I really wanted to go to the Czech Republic because the Czech Republic has this amazing history of garnets and cutting. And on that trip, I was in London for 2 days, and I met these two guys who, this is the Chas Matthews Company. Very sadly, they closed last year after 125 years. Or it closed this year, actually. It was like in March. And so I met these two guys, and I was so, well, first of all, let's just look at these two guys for a minute. I love these guys. Like, they're two grumpy old British men with very, very archaic old technology. I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but this guy is using a hand crank machine that was built in the 1940s. And their company started in London, in Hatton Garden in the 1870s, and they've, you know, that company has been passing the company down and down and down until finally in the 1970s, these guys apprenticed, and then I think in the mid-80s or something, they bought the company and, you know, became the last generation to have it. And sadly, they've closed. But anyway, I met these guys, and I had been wanting to meet these guys because I had heard about them a year before. I was in this conference in Zermatt, and so 2017 for me, this is like the beginning of my whole research story. Like, I didn't know anyone in the trade yet. I had just moved to Bangkok. I was literally just out of gemology school. I didn't know anybody, and nobody knew me. And I went to this. I knew one person actually. I knew two. No, I knew one. It was Vincent Pardue, and this is a good person if you're only going to know one person. Because he was talking at this talk, at this conference. And so we went, me and my wife, who was sort of also, he's kind of a mentor to both of us. And so we came in to sort of support him. But then I ended up meeting Alan Hart and people from GIA London and some other people. And one of the people that I met that weekend told me, oh, there's these two guys in London that are doing like old, almost, he said pedal powered, because I think he hadn't seen it. But I was like, wait, what? There's old guys in London that are cutting in this sort of really old-fashioned way. I must see these guys. So I eventually got to meet him. It was like a week before Christmas or a couple weeks before Christmas, so nobody wants to see anybody in Hatton Garden in December, right? It's like very busy. And I got to go up for like an hour and just chat with these guys. And despite the fact that I had just been through Amsterdam and like a week in the Czech Republic, like at the old cutting factories and stuff, like the thing that I came home with was this just huge excitement for having met these guys. Like I really just felt like there was something here, and they're very old. So I was thinking, ooh, this is a time-sensitive subject. Like I really need to, I just felt like I really needed to do something. So I get home, it's like Christmas, and like the night that I got home, I was like, I need to go back as soon as I can. Like I really need to go back and do something. And at this time, I was just starting the research. Like I didn't know what I was doing yet. I had no experience. Like I don't have a background in research or writing or grant writing or fundraising or anything. But I went home and I went on Google, research grant history London. And the first thing that popped up was the what is it called? The Antiquarian Society of London has a £5,000 research grant, or an up to £5,000 research grant for somebody who wants to do a project related to London history. And I was like, wow, first Google result, there it is. And I, downloaded it. I'm looking at the form and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't know anything about grant writing at all. But I was like, I know how to tell my story that I want to do, which was I want to go back to London and shadow these guys and document everything that they know how to do, because their 125-year-old company has been handing down these traditions for all these years, and they're the last ones. I didn't know at that time that they were about to close. Well, maybe I did. I mean, they don't have apprentices and they're old, so they're not going to take them on now, because I asked them and they said they weren't going to take them on now. They don't care. So, but I got to the end of the grant and it was like, you need a sponsor. And I was like, oh man, who's going to sponsor me? But I actually did know one other person besides Vincent, and that was Jack Ogden. And Jack Ogden, if you're only going to know two people, Jack Ogden is a great second, because Jack Ogden has written a ton of books about gem history and jewelry history, and he knows a lot of people in London, and he's on the board of like a lot of different groups and stuff. And I had met him the same weekend that I met the Chas Matthews guys. I had emailed him for some other reason, and then we ended up having lunch that weekend. So when I got back with all this excitement and enthusiasm, I said, Jack, I need your help, because this grant application is due in 6 days. Like when I downloaded it, it was due in 6 days. So I was like, I have to go as fast as I can. And I did. And, so I'm like reaching out to anyone, because again, I don't know anything about grant writing and I don't know how to do this. So I'm asking Vincent, my mentor, and I'm asking Jack, who's not really my mentor, but, he kind of is. He's my British mentor, I guess. And so he agreed to, be my sponsor for this thing, like just to vouch for me, essentially. And I was just thinking, like, I have to get it, because I really, really want to go back and document what these guys are doing. It's very important to me. And I was just sort of starting to understand at that time that, like, my personal research calling is going around the world and documenting what these old guys are doing, because nobody else is doing it, and they're all retiring. But this was the first time that I ever actually tried to do it, because, to take a couple months off of work and life and, essentially like quit your job or whatever, it's very expensive, and I'm in Bangkok, so it's extra far. And I remember the day that I got the email telling me that I got the grant, because I was in Bangkok on my way home from work. I was working at a gemology school, and I was on a river taxi just like this, and I checked my email from the river taxi, and I got an email from them saying, you've received the grant, you're getting the full amount of £5,000, and like and basically like we're not requiring you to do anything specific, you're just getting the grant. And I was like, oh my God, like it worked, I can't believe it. So I get home, I'm so excited, and I give a call to these guys, but I hadn't told them that I did this. Like the whole, and I didn't mention this, but the research grant was written specifically around them. Like it was like, I'm going to go to London for 2 months and I'm going to document what these guys are doing as a way of archiving and preserving the traditional cutting heritage of London. And the Antiquarian Society thought that was a great idea, but I didn't tell them that. I mean, I hadn't asked them or anything. I just sort of assumed that it was going to work. So I call them, and I don't know if you guys have ever tried to call international like in the old way before cell phones, because these guys are on landlines. So, you know, dialing international, there's like 2 echoes in the call, you know. Hey, is this Chaz Matthews? Hey, is this Chaz? Hey, is it? And they're just like, what? It's Justin. It's Justin. It's just. I'm calling from Bangkok. Yeah, okay, I can understand that. And I asked them, you know, I said, hey, I just got this research grant. I want to come back. I want to, you know, sort of tell your guys' story. Can I come and like essentially like apprentice with you guys for like 2 months? And he was just like, no. And I was like, I didn't expect that. It hadn't occurred to me that he would say no. And he said no. And my mind is just spinning. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to give the grant back because it's literally written around me apprenticing with them. And I said, well, could I come in for like, you know, a couple of weeks? And they're just like, no, like we don't have the room, we don't have the machine, we don't have the time, and we don't want to. And we're busy working. And I was like, okay, understandable. Again, my mind is racing, and I'm on this very terrible phone call echoing thing. And you know, you don't want to be on that call for very long. So I'm just trying to salvage the situation while I'm on the phone with them. Could I possibly come once a week for an hour or 2 with my camera and document what you guys are doing over a couple of months? And he was like, okay, we can deal with that. So then I felt like, okay, I have fulfilled what I told them I was going to do in the grant. So because they said that, because the terms were like that, I knew I was going to have to fill out the time in other ways, but which ended up being perfect because 2 months with these guys is too much time. Again, they're grumpy old British men. You can't spend, you know, how much time do you want to spend with your own grandparents at work? That's kind of what it is. But they're nice anyway. But so I planned my trip out, and so I expanded the reach because I realized, okay, these guys are only one part of the story because there's Whitby and there's Birmingham and there's Cornwall and there's, you know, Castleton and there's all this stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going on the road. I was going to try to do it for longer, but I have a wife and a dog and it wasn't going to work out. So 2 months, that's what I had. So, okay, I set up some talks. I set up some travels to meet some of the other gem cutters in Britain, some of the hobby cutters and some of the other professional cutters up in Whitby and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I'm going. I got my ticket booked. I'm on the road. What am I doing here? What is my goal? So, and this is what I told the Historical Society as well. This is what I want to do. I want to document the history of gem cutting because if you try to find an article before I wrote it, it doesn't really exist. You know, if you wanted to read the history of gem cutting in England, you can't. It doesn't exist. It's never been written down. So that was my main goal. I want to write this story. I want to go to London. I'm going to go to Birmingham. I'm going to go to Whitby. I went to Castleton too. I want to spend as much time with these guys, as much as they will tolerate me in their working space while they're working. And they were quite kind. You know, it took them a couple of weeks to warm up to me, but in the end, we became very friendly, and you know, we're still friends to this day. But you know, I had my camera, I had microphones, I had video. You know, I wanted to get their story. I wanted to see the actual techniques of how they're working with these old, you know, 1800s. Yeah, I didn't say this. The 1940 machine is from the 1820s. Like the technology is from the 1820s. So these guys are really like living in a time bubble here. Like going into their office is literally like, it could be, you know, I don't know, could be the 1830s in there, other than they have a landline. But, you know, emails, no. Text messages, no. Yeah, the landline. That was the only way to try to talk to them. So I wanted to really document and write down technical details. Because as a gem cutter, I'm in the perfect position to be able to go in and be like, what grit of diamond powder are you using? What is the actual type of metal that this lap is made out of? You know, stuff that another kind of researcher wouldn't think to ask because they're not a gem cutter. Like I wanted to actually be able to replicate what they were doing. And I have, thankfully, because now they're gone. So that was a big part of the goal. And then, of course, just meet as many other cutters. What is going on in Britain? Because it's not just London, right? There's hobby cutters and there's professional cutters all over the place. So this is essentially how it broke down. I spent 6 weeks in England. I rented a car for a ridiculous amount of money. And then for the little bit of time before and a lot of the time after, I spent a year and a half doing more research outside of being here. Like a lot of the time that I was here was in like the British Library and in the museums of the Library of the V&A and the Library of the Natural History Museum, and going behind the scenes and getting stones that are not on display and getting them in the microscope and taking a bunch of photos and videos. So I basically took photos of everything that I did while I was here, but I didn't read any of the stuff while I was here because I didn't have time. So when I went home, I digested all that stuff. Okay, I listened back to all the videos that I shot with them. What did they tell me? I wrote it all down. What did I read? I have to read it now. And so I spent a year and a half writing all that stuff. But then in the meantime, I had driven about 900 miles in 2 different trips around and around the thing. And I gave talks as I went. I gave a talk somewhere in the Midlands, and I gave a talk in Bristol. And I went to some of the lapidary clubs, which is super fun. And I shot tons of, interview footage. And I went home with tons of books and tons of photos of books. I should have put how many photos did I take, because it was probably 3,000 to 4,000 in terms of just, so many pages of books, just iPhone photos in the library, just, scanning them essentially. I went home with British faceting machines, which is another absurd hobby of mine. I have 125 faceting machines now from about 45 different countries. And I gave some talks along the way. So, but the 5,000 pounds, this was such looking back, I don't know, it seems a bit small to me now because later trips I've done cost so much more than this. But at that time, for me, it was like a dream. How do you make the dream come true? I want to go to England. I don't have the money. I'm on like a less than minimum wage teacher salary because minimum wage in Thailand is so low compared to what I would otherwise be making in America. So I didn't have any money to do this. It was literally just the grant. And whatever, I couldn't go outside of the grant because I just didn't have it. So it was like, how do you make the dream come true? How do you do it? So I came home and I collated all that information. And I'm then looking back on like the highlights, right? All this different stuff that I got to see, the antique faceting machines that the Chas Matthews guys are still using, and then going into the British Library and just, there's so much information there. They gave me some books, I think, on that trip from like the 1300s, and they just sort of like let me, the Goldsmiths Library did this too. The Goldsmiths Library has records going, like handwritten records going back to the 1300s, and they just sort of like let you have them. Here you go. It's like, wait a minute, don't I need like gloves? Like, again, I don't know how to look at old books. I didn't then, I do now. But it's like someone just gives you a book from the 1200s and you're just allowed to, they just assume that you know what to do with it. And luckily I didn't do anything wrong, but it's, it's so cool. Going into the museums, seeing some of the jewelry, exploring Hatton Garden, which I didn't know very well. And then of course I spent hours and hours and hours here upstairs because the wonderful but highly unorganized library of Jeme has so many good things that aren't in any other libraries. There's a lot of stuff in the library here that literally nobody else has, especially like periodicals and stuff that have just been thrown away. The Goldsmiths Library, essentially this talk originally was a sort of a celebration of libraries. I love libraries, like just to sit in the library all day, especially a research library where you're just getting out, finding amazing old books from the 1820s. You can't see it very well, but this is John Maw, Familiar Lessons in Gemology and Geology, and it's the first British drawing of a jam peg, which is what these guys are using, that's ever been made. So I found this photo, or this drawing, in this book, and it was just like, wow. Okay, 1820, data point, boom. That's the oldest picture that's ever been made of that machine. So we know that it at least existed then. Because, trying to figure out the history of this stuff is a bit hazy because nobody ever wrote it down. So you're trying to like puzzle piece it back together by finding all these random books. And, you're literally getting one line out of a whole book and then putting that into your notes. And then you get one line here and you got to go through 1,000 books. And eventually you have 1,000 lines and then you got to rewrite them. And then, meeting all the cutters and some of the other authors here. The Chas Matthews guys were the first ones, but then, there's Indian cutters here, there's Italian cutters here, there's Pakistani cutters here, there's Sri Lankan cutters here, Kim Ricks, maybe you guys know her. And then the final component here, and this was actually the sweetest icing on the cake that there could have been, because I came here to see these two guys, thinking they were the only ones left. And totally on accident, I met Ken Harrington, which is this guy. Now, Ken Harrington is like 5 years older than both Peter and John of Chas Matthews. And Ken apprenticed at Chas Matthews before they did. But I didn't know that because I hadn't met him, because he doesn't live in London. He lives in Ipswich. So I accidentally met Ken through a website selling tools, like his business partner sells tools. And I was like, who's selling tools in Ipswich, gem cutting tools? And I called, and Ken, aged, 83, picks up the phone, and he's so warm. He's so welcoming. He's literally like, you got to come down tomorrow. I explained to him what I'm doing. You got to come down tomorrow. We'll pick you up from the bus station or the train station or whatever. And I spent the whole day with these guys, the whole crew at Salamander Gems. And Ken now has become like a serious mentor of mine. Like, we talk every week. And to me, what was so funny about Ken, because I had spent so much time with these guys who don't have cell phones and don't have texts and don't have emails, Ken, what's up, sends me stuff every week. He shows me what he's working on. He sends me videos, good quality videos. He's got a new iPhone. He knows how to use it. I'm just like, Ken, how is it possible? You're 83 or whatever, and these guys are only in their late 70s. Why are you this adapted to the modern world? And he was just like, that's just how I am. I'm nice. And I won't tell you what he had to say about those guys, but I'm nice. That's basically what we can sum it up as. Ken is very nice, and he has become I visit Ken several times every year. I go out of my way to go see Ken, because he is the true master. He knows everything that these guys know, and he knows everything that everyone here knows and more. He's got so many strange tricks that I've never seen another cutter do, and it's just constantly rewarding for me to come back and visit him. So he is the ultimate prize of this experience that I had, because I got a mentor out of it. I got a teacher out of it. And in my own personal journey of becoming a good gem cutter, it gets harder and harder to find great teachers. At some point you get to a certain level in your craft that you just don't have that many people above you anymore. And I need people like Ken and Peter and John to help me elevate my own craft and incorporate what they're doing. But then, of course, I got to go all to these other places. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to Whitby, but if you haven't, you really should. It is so cool. It is one of my favorite places in the UK. It's just everything that you want it to be and more. Whether you're coming from the Whitby Jet side, and there's so much to see about that. I got to meet Sarah Steele, who then took me out into the bay where they can go and just find jet in the water. We got to go see this 1850s perfect recreation time capsule of a jet cutting workshop. I got to go and learn how to cut jet with her and her family, and go into the museums there that have all this old Victorian and Roman and thousands of years of jet. But then also, this whole other side of Whitby, which is like the Dracula thing, right? Like, this is England's spookiest city. And it totally is. I stayed at Sarah's house, and I'd get up super early in the morning. It's all foggy. And, Whitby's on the coast, and it is kind of spooky in the fog. And I got Dracula audiobook on the headphones, and I'm just walking around Whitby at 6 o'clock in the morning in the fog. And I'm just like, this is so cool. Whitby is really cool. You guys should, if you haven't been, you should really go. And then, some of these other places that just surprised me with what was there, Derbyshire. It's not the place you'd think of when you're thinking about British gem cutting. But actually, there's a place in Derbyshire called Cock Abbey, and I discovered the oldest British gem cutting machine that still exists. This is literally a Victorian one. It's still there. Because Cock Abbey has a strange history where in the 1920s, they closed the house, and it was closed until the 1980s when the National Trust bought it. And nobody was in it. And the family that had lived there had died, and they had a gem cutting machine in there. They had a collection of cabochons that they had done, and this is literally the only still existing one. Cock Abbey doesn't even know it's there. I've tried to tell them several times, hey, do you guys know? And they don't even care. They don't want to talk to me. The National Trust, they got other things to do. But, such interesting history that's coming out of here because of Castleton and the Blue John, and mineralogist John Maw, who was from there, who was cutting all these things, and then he had a shop in London, and it just goes on and on. It's just so pretty. Yeah, this is Castleton. This is the Blue John mine. So you're kind of on the side of this mountain, and then you can go into the doorway that's in that little building down there. And then this is not a good photo, but this is the inside of the mine, and you got the streams of the fluorite, the Blue John fluorite, just in the wall. And then getting to meet some of the, there's a cutting community in the UK. It's called the UK Facet Cutters Guild, just hobbyists, not professional people. But I got to go and meet almost everybody in the different parts. Some are in Bristol, some are more in the Midlands and up north a little bit, and just kind of go hang out with them and see the total other thing that they're doing there. Just so fun. And then later on, I got to go to Birmingham, which doesn't have a ton of stuff to see about gem cutting, but just walking around that neighborhood, the old jewelry district, it's so cool. The buildings are so pretty. And I got to meet some of the gem people that were there and then introduce them to Ken and some of the other people I met. So I love, just being able to come and experience this stuff in such a tactile way. The buildings are still there, the machines are still there, the people are still there, and you can talk to them and touch them and meet them. And for me, it sort of just becomes part of my life, which is a gift. And then meeting, going to some of the rock and gem shows and meeting the Bristol Lapidary Society and going to their workshop and kind of presenting what I'm doing, and then they're presenting what they're doing. And it's such a communal activity, going to some of their houses and seeing their personal workshops, and then later coming back and buying some of the stuff. Because, all of these old timers eventually have to get rid of their machines. And then that's where I come in, and I'm just like, remember, I came and did that talk that time. I got that collection. So yeah, it's just been, it was amazing and this is just 2 months, right? This is 2 intensive months where all day, every day, I'm just researching. So finally, because ultimately this whole talk is about how do you make your dreams come true, right? Like, you want to do something, you don't know how to do it. I didn't have the money. I don't know how to do research. I don't even have a bachelor's degree. I don't have the qualifications to do the things that I'm doing. I'm just going to do them anyway. And so to kind of sum it all up, writing an article or writing a book, it's very much like starting your career in the gem trade, because you're going to make up a lot of it, right? If you're lucky enough to have a good mentor, they can show you the rules and show you the ropes, but no one's going to be able to tell you where to work or how to start your own business or how to run that stuff. And it's hard. And writing a book is also hard. It's a lot of time sitting in the library and researching and reading and then thinking about stuff and then thinking about, oh man, well, that book says this and that guy said that, and those two things are actually the opposites. Somebody's wrong here. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention this. I finished the article 1.5 years, right? 1.5 years of writing that. And I sent it in to the Journal of Gemology, Gem A. I was so excited. I've never done this. I've never submitted something for peer review. If you haven't done it, you should, but it's very challenging because the peer review came back in the first week of the pandemic when I had just lost my job, and there was a red thing in every single paragraph for 30 pages, which means you need to make changes or there's something wrong with what you wrote. And I had to put that away for like a year because it was the pandemic and there was a lot of other stuff going on. But I opened it, and I think this was actually the second peer review because they had already told me I needed to rewrite it. Because again, I don't know how to do this. I didn't know how to do this. But you learn how to do it, right? You're inventing the whole process as you go. So doing the peer review is you learning how to become a writer, for me at least. It was me learning how to become a writer. But getting, you spend so much time on this thing and you think it's great. And then you give it to them and they're like, oh, there's potential in there, maybe. But you're going to have to do a lot more work. And you didn't do any of your citations correctly. Okay, so I put it away. I brought it back out. Okay, it eventually did get done. Asking for help is essential. If I didn't ask Vincent for help way back in Bangkok, I would have never got the job that led me to even going to this trip. If I didn't ask for help from the Historical Society to get the grant, I would have never done it, and it would have never been done. If I didn't ask Jack Ogden, who I didn't know very well at that time, if he would sponsor me on this, I wouldn't have got the grant. And I think because he was my co-signer, that went a long way. Like, he knows them very well. And then I emailed every library, every museum, and I got to become friends with people whose books I had read. You know, people who sent me the email back from the V&A or the Natural History Museum. And I was like, oh, Rachel Church, I just read your book. I can't believe you're emailing me back for this thing about me coming to see the library. Wow, okay, cool. Just sort of people that you imagine are sort of like, I don't know, legendary in terms of their writing the books that you're reading. And then suddenly you just sort of get to go and hang out with them at work. So if you ask, you pretty much can do whatever you want if you have a good reason to. So if you make a good reason to, like, I want to come and learn about this, probably they'll say yes, because, why not? So if you can just figure out the thing, the dream, and then figure out a plan, and then ask all of the people along the way if they'll help you, they will probably say yes. Hopefully, luckily, if you cross your fingers, not always, but, if they have time, if they can, they usually will say yes. And then you just have to keep doing it forever. That's the hard part. The 1.5 years of research is a lot harder than just coming to London for 2 months. But in the end, it did work. It did happen. And I will show you. So we finished this article, and we did it in 2 parts because it was so long. And thankfully, the Journal of Gemology said we could do it this way as long as I submitted both parts at once, so they knew that I was going to finish the article. So we finished this thing, and I would like to show you just a very short video that I made that's kind of like the trailer of the article. It gives you a little bit of a sense of some of the stuff that I saw and some of the people that I met.
The History of London's Lapidaries. A 2-part article exploring the history of gem cutting in Great Britain. The story of British gem cutting goes back at least to the 14th century, when copper wheels and brick dust were the tools of the trade, and stones were cut on hand-cranked machines, faceted freehand. The industry's early history reveals the influence of foreign cutting techniques as wave after wave of immigrant craftsmen arrive in London throughout its history. During the Renaissance, the cutting techniques evolved and we see new cut styles emerge, such as those seen in the Jewels of the Cheapside hoard. During the Victorian period, we see jewelers and gem cutters settle into the Hatton Garden area, which eventually became a hub for servicing London's gem and jewelry trade. London was an early adopter of new cutting technology in the 1820s, which allowed it to become an important player in the 19th and 20th century European gemstone cutting trade. Some of London's lapidaries still cut the old-fashioned way, while Britain's hobbyist lapidary community began with the introduction of new machines and new techniques from the US in the 1940s. Dive deep into the history of London's lapidaries in the fall 2021 issue of the Journal of Gemology.
And then finally, the dream was accomplished. 1.5 years of work, 2 months of travel, 5,000 pounds, 28 pages. And now, personally, for me, my dream is achieved because I spent so much time upstairs in the library, and now my article is upstairs in the library, which to me is really cool. That is like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something like that. But anyway, if you guys want to check it out, it's up there, or you can find it online. And then, of course, the story goes on and on and on. The books, the research. I'm at year 7 now in this research that started way back when I went to that conference in Zermatt. Did I mention I'm addicted to research? It doesn't end. So, okay, that's pretty much the little story I wanted to tell, how to party like a British scholar. That's it. And then eventually you end up in the evening after too much wine and too much research, just sleeping in the library like an old researching guy. Thank you, guys. Let's talk about whatever you guys want to talk about now.